Welcome back to the Athletes Podcast. This is episode 103 featuring Mac Clark, a Canadian 17-year-old who is tearing up the tracks in Canada, the US, sprinkling in some Italy tours, both in go-karts and Formula cars. The kid is a stud, lives just outside Toronto, has been driving since the age of 10 years old. We dive into the Drivers' Championship, who's winning, Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton. He explained kind of his insights as to who he's been learning from, the mentors who have provided him the knowledge, experience, wisdom that he's now putting into action. He's crushing on his tour, a couple points behind his championship series in Austin, Texas in a couple weeks. Really hope you enjoy the 103rd episode of the Athletes Podcast featuring Matt Clark. Here we go. Awesome. I'll have to give full credits to Jordo who lent me this shirt to wear today because Ferrari looked better than whatever the heck else I was going to be wearing. My Honda Civic shirt wouldn't. But Mac, we're super excited to feature you here on the Athletes Podcast. 17-year-old who's tearing up the tracks in both Canada, the US, Italy, both in go-karts and Formula cars. Matt Clark, welcome to the Athletes Podcast. Thanks for coming on, man.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me.
We're amped up for this episode. We were doing some research right before to check out whether you were actually the youngest individual who we featured on the pod, but I think Malachi Diath has you beat by maybe 6 or 8 months. But nonetheless, amped up to have just outside of Toronto native join in. Tell us a bit about who you are, kind of how you become this young phenom in the Canadian ranks as far as racing is concerned.
Yeah, so like you said, born and raised here in Toronto. And I started go-karting when I was 10 years old, just kind of following in the footsteps of my father. As a young boy, Formula One and higher level racing intrigued me. And then since then, I've kind of just worked my way up, started, regional karting, then ended up, going all the way to international, competing in Europe, coming back here, starting my car racing career. And now I'm racing Formula 4 in the United States.
So are you sitting right now in your sim? Is this where you spend your time when you're not on the track?
Pretty much. This is like my home away from home. And it's where my good camera and my mic is. So
yeah, dude, you have a legit setup right now. It might look better than mine right now,
you.
actually. I'm not gonna lie. I'm kind of jealous. So you start racing at 10, working your way from karts to Formula 4. Obviously your dad being a race car driver prior to it gives you some experience, insight, as well as his father. Like, can you maybe start off by giving like a little background on your family and how they maybe didn't guide you to this, but it was almost in your blood?
It's crazy. It 100% is in my blood. Both my grandparents on either side race. So my dad's dad as well as my mom's dad, and even my mom's mom, my grandmother raced karts.
Wow.
And I was never pushed to do it. So my dad started karting really late in his 30s, and then eventually he started racing on a national level in cars. But I was never really drawn towards it until I got a little bit older. And then, when I was 8 or 9, I started bugging my dad. I'm like, "Hey, Dad, like, I want to try karting." And he's like, "No, like, go play baseball with your friends or do this or do that." And I did for a few years. And then finally I was 10. I'm like, "Dad, listen, like, man, I really, really want to try it." He let me try it, and I immediately fell in love with it.
Damn. So what was the turning point? How'd you know what was like you take a fly ball off the forehead and that was like the end of the day, or what was the deal? Like, obviously other sports were involved. Like, you didn't just jump right to karting. What was kind of that foundation that led you to it?
So I started when I was young. I think I was in like skating lessons and then like, I don't know, soccer and baseball. And I was never really that good at other sports and really applied myself that much. And even like initially when I started racing, it was more of a hobby, like just kind of like, I want to go to the racetrack with my dad on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon and race go-karts. But then when I was 12 years old, I started getting really competitive about it, and that's kind of when my career took off.
So no sports prior to that. You just like got the competitive juices flowing at 12 and that was it. And then you end up beating guys like Paul Tracy at an indoor K1 karting launch event.
Yeah, exactly. That was an awesome experience, but kind of going back to my karting roots like that. But yeah, like really no fire in me until I was like 12, 13 years old. And I just kind of decided like I want to be a professional race car driver.
Crazy. I mean, you mentioned the shirt that I was wearing. Obviously, you're into F1 as well. Who's your favorite team, favorite driver? Like, let's get some context here so we know what we're working with.
Yeah, for sure. I wouldn't say I have a favorite team. I really love Daniel Ricciardo, more as like a mentor. I met him once in 2017, and I think his attitude is amazing towards the sport, as well as his off-track attitude. So, I try to carry that positivity with me. And his signature move is the shoey. So if he wins a race, he'll take his racing boot off, pour champagne in it, and drink out of it. And I told my mom if I win at the Formula One Grand Prix in 2 weeks, that's what I'm gonna do.
No way. Okay, well, we're gonna
Yeah,
hold you
yeah.
to that. That's amazing. So I was gonna bring up that maybe we'll touch on it at the end, but Jordan just brought up like the hot question right now is would you drink out of his shoe if you were with him on the podium?
Oh man, for sure, I would. I have to. He's my hero. I would have to.
Well, you've worked with some motorsports legends like Robert Wickens, James Hinchcliffe, Scott Hargrove, Scott Goodyear. Like maybe shine a little bit of light on the experience and knowledge and wisdom that you've gained from those kind of individuals, how you got connected, introduced to them. Like, give us some backstory here. Like, were you just walking up saying, "Hey, I'm a kid from Canada that wants to race and be the best IndyCar driver in the world"?
Almost. Robert was actually a pretty close family friend. So I raced for his older brother's karting team. So his older brother, Trevor Wickens, kind of, I guess, molded Robert into the driver that he is today. And so we were pretty close with him, and he gave me a lot of advice when I was younger. And then this year, working with James Hinchcliffe has been incredible. He's part of my management group. So I'm managed by a company called Speed Group, and James is actually one of the founders. So throughout the year, I've kind of been getting his advice, before I go to a specific circuit or before I drive a specific car, and not only that, but just like general advice for the sport specifically. We were talking earlier today a little bit about the championship finale in a few weeks, and just the mentality going into it. So you just pick up like these really valuable lessons that you might not learn unless you do it yourself. But I can kind of take that knowledge and use it to my benefit.
For sure. Like, this incredible to have someone like that in your ear giving you little tidbits that you need to hear at the right time. Like, that's invaluable information. I'm very jealous because the equivalent for like a hockey or a golf is like legitimately like a Connor McDavid, a Sidney Crosby, a Tiger Woods.
100%.
Like, those are the best of the best in your sport. Like, it's brings up a good point. Like, how do you work your way up as a driver? It's pretty known, within North America, sports like football, going from high school to NCAA to the NFL. How does it work for you as a racer if someone's looking to follow in your shoes and emulate the success you've had?
So racing's kind of complicated in that way, and I mean it's not a sport that a lot of people know a lot about, if that makes sense. Most kids, I'd say every successful driver starts in karts. So kids as young as like 3, 4, 5 years old start jumping in these little go-karts and driving them around. I started a little late. I started when I was 10, which some people go like, "Oh my God, that's late," but it is for a professional driver. So everyone starts in karts, and then you start kind of like at the club level, then you move to the regional level, national level, and that's all different series. So you compete in different series until you get to like a certain prestige inside the inside the country, and then if you're good enough, you can win what they call a ticket to the world finals. So there's a few different types of like international sporting events that go on where you can win a ticket from your national country, and then essentially you'll go onto the international stage and represent your company. It's kind of like the Olympics for karting, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I was fortunate enough to have that opportunity. And then once you kind of do that, most people say, okay, you're qualified to jump in a race car. So I jumped in my first race car when I was 14 years old. And unlike most, I guess, semi-professional sports, you do have to pay for the lower levels of racing cars, no matter how good you are. So that's something
Okay.
that's a little bit different.
What's that cost look like? Like, I'm thinking in my head, we've got Haley Daniels coming on the show in a couple weeks, who's a canoeist for Team Canada.
Hmm.
Like, it costs her $50,000 a year to just compete, strictly do her events, get to from expenses all included. Like, what does it look like as a racer? Because this is an expensive sport. Whether it's the cars you're driving, the places you're traveling to, what does that look like for you? And like, how do you manage to fulfill all of the needs you need from a financial perspective?
Hmm. I'm lucky enough to come from my family is they do well. So we're able to afford definitely a portion of the budget that we need. I won't go into too much detail about like how much the 2021 season costs, but
Hmm.
for next year, looking at USF 2000, which is the first rung in the Road to Indy, an entry level budget for USF 2000 is about $350,000 American, which is it's mind blowing, man.
So I'm trying to think of, if I was 17 years old, how I would have been feeling about 350K being put in towards
Yeah.
that. Like that's got to be a wild amount of money. But I guess, growing up in the sport, you get accustomed to it, and obviously you have goals of going much larger. That's something that you actually talk about, becoming a motorsport engineer, along with going and becoming a real virtual pro racing driver. Like, do you want to dive into how important that piece of getting an education is to your parents, maybe, for checking that box off so that you aren't just racing your whole life?
Yeah, that deal was made with my father years ago. Like he said, listen, man, if you want to race and you want to go all the way, you need to have a backup plan because you see it time and time again where professional athletes, something happens that maybe isn't their fault on or off the ice for lack of a better term. But I really need that education, that backup plan, and I love motorsports so much that I'm like, hey, why not go to school to become a motorsport engineer? So a little nerve wracking because I was actually looking at colleges and universities the other week and kind of deciding where I wanted to go, and I think I've kind of found the program that I want to apply to. But yeah, I'm looking forward to
Are you going to share with the Athletes Podcast listeners, viewers, what program that is?
that. For sure, for sure. I'm looking at the Automotive Engineering program at Ontario Tech. It's
Okay.
a relatively new school. It's in the GTA. I think it's the only accredited automotive engineering program in all of Canada. So when you're done, you actually get a degree. And I think that it's really going to help my racing career because the driving and the engineering kind of go hand in hand. Being an engineer is going to help me become a better driver, whether I'm talking to, my current engineers about the setup of the car, how I want the car to feel, what it does mechanically, and then vice versa. I think driving is also going to make me a better engineer. So kind of goes both ways.
For sure. Like I'm thinking, like I was reading, doing my research, you're like studying the sport all the time. So maybe what does that look like for you, scratching the surface on it? How do you go about studying? Are you just watching the lines that guys are taking? Are you looking at different approaches to longer races? Like what's the studying include?
It's almost like football players watching film in a way.
Okay.
So, for example, if I've never been to a track before, then I'll watch video on that track, like you said, the lines. So where the drivers are positioning their car, where they're braking, where they're accelerating, as well as how a track races, because that's completely different than going fast. It's almost like in hockey when you learn how to skate, but then you got to learn how to play the game. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like that. And it's really good to see that beforehand and not make the mistakes that you watch other people make or maybe do some of the smarter things that you've seen other drivers do.
For sure, that's probably comes from that wisdom of getting all those vets in your ear telling you how to approach the race each and every time. What's the difference, wet track, dry track? Like I know driving my Civic, I mentioned it's not a big deal, but when you're ripping around, like how does that feel?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this year we're excess of 240 kilometers an hour on the straight. So
Hmm.
it sounds fast, but for a race car, it's relatively slow. Because I'm in
Yeah,
the
no
junior
big deal,
levels.
eh? Yeah, no big
No big
deal.
deal. No
Yeah,
big deal.
yeah.
But the rain offers an incredible challenge. Everything changed when it rains. It's like the greatest equalizer because no matter how your car's set up, it's mostly down to the driver, and it gets pretty hairy. I mean, we have wet tires that we put on, so usually in the dry we race full racing slick, so there's zero tread on the tire, nothing like road tires at all. And then if it downpours, we put on rain tires, which have tread to disperse water to give us a little bit more grip in those slippery conditions. But the lines change. So you go from running usually tighter in the corners on the rubber in the dry to
Hmm.
wider to try to find some grip off the rubber in the wet. And you can feel the car kind of moving around a little bit. And the team will change the setup. So we'll make the car a little bit softer, maybe change springs, stuff like that. So it's definitely a nice challenge. And I definitely enjoy driving in the rain.
It's you mentioned feeling the car, and that was a point of contention when I was chatting with Demi Chalkias. What was it, August of last year during the AP tour? She brought up how you, as a racer, really have to feel it with your butt, for lack of a better term, like where the car is, how it's feeling, what it's doing. Can you maybe describe those feelings and to a listener, for example, or someone who's watching, how exactly that feels to understand, going into a turn, what you need to do or how you need to approach a certain race? Like, I'm curious on that note because people don't necessarily feel it when they're driving on the QEW up to Toronto.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, in a race car, you're always kind of on the limit of what the car can do, right? So it's either going to slide in the front or slide in the back. And a lot of that feeling in the driver comes from your butt, like you said, or, your hands on the steering wheel. So something like that is completely foreign to an everyday commuter.
Mm-hmm.
But, if you were, say, to do a track day, then you kind of feel that. It's almost like talking to the car. It sounds stupid, but you kind of have to understand what the car is telling you and then use that knowledge the next lap to try to go even faster. So, say I'm approaching a turn and I brake and I turn in, and then I can start to feel the rear end of the car step out, and I might not be able to get back to throttle as early as I want to get a good exit. Well, the next lap, I'll back it up a little bit because I understand that if I take in that same amount of speed, the car's going to slide. So just small things like that and adapting every lap. I'd say that's what makes a good driver, being able to feel the car.
Yeah, clearly, obviously, age has no bearing on being a good driver. What did it feel like to be able to drive a race car, do 240 kilometers an hour when you couldn't drive legally on a normal road?
Everyone, that's like the running joke I have with everyone. Like, I don't even have my G2, and I'm a race car driver.
Yeah.
Uh, but the first time I did it, it was crazy because I came out of karts, and the first time I ever tested a car, it was like, oh my god, like this is really fast. And the strange part is after a few sessions or days in the car, like it becomes completely normal. Like I don't even notice the speed anymore. So as a 14-year-old kid, like eyes wide, giant smile on my face, heading down the back straight for the first time. And I still do enjoy the speed. Like I'll have little moments of appreciation, like after a race is done and we're coming in on the in lap, like I'll be like, oh my god, like I'm driving a race car, like this is so cool. But it's pretty normal for me now.
So, do you have a favorite car that you love to drive that gets your eyes wide open like that? You said every time you get behind the wheel, it's just it's going to be fun.
Mhm. Um, I'd say probably my first championship car. I mean, the 2020 Formula 1600 with Britain West Motorsports. That car was so much fun to drive. And unlike the F4, we actually used street tires. We drove on street tires. So they were actually really slippery in the dry. And we used
Okay.
street tire in the wet and the dry. And the car was all over the place, all over, like all the time. And that car was so much fun to drive.
Can you describe the Gforce when driving on the track, and in turn, what workouts, exercises you do to help deal with that? I think one of the most unknown topics in racing is how athletic and how important you guys being in good tip top shape physically is towards making sure that you can perform when a race day turn comes.
Yeah, for sure. A lot like some people I know don't even consider racing a sport because they don't think there's a physical aspect.
Tell them to
Uh,
come into the athletes podcast. We got a
yeah,
couple
come
on
watch
here.
the athletes podcast. But yeah, you have to be like 100% you have to be physically sharp to drive a race car. Your heart is at like excess of 180 beats per minute. And like you mentioned the G forces. When you're cornering that fast in a car with that much grip, because it's not like I'm driving, like you said, like your Honda Civic around the track, right? It's a
Mm-hmm.
proper race car with slick tires and stiff suspension. So, we're cornering at excess of like 170, 180 kilometers an hour, and that really puts a toll on your body, especially in an open wheel car where you're just kind of strapped in, and you got to keep your neck up, or even on the ovals and stuff like that. So, drivers definitely have to be in good shape physically to stay sharp mentally, if that makes sense. So you never want to let your physical aspect affect your mental aspect. You never, at the end of like a 40-minute race, you never want to be worried about your arms being tired because that might affect your mental game. So in terms of like workouts, I'll do cardio stuff. So I'll run, I'll do elliptical, and then like usually for strength training, I've wanted to get into bench pressing, but I haven't so far because I don't have the equipment. But I do a lot of body weight stuff. So like push-ups, sit-ups, burpees, planks,
Mm-hmm.
things like that.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah, 100%. I think mixing in that resistance training will only benefit you long term. We'll have to figure out a way to get you. You're in Milton, so we might have to get a workout in or something and
For
see
sure.
where we can learn some racing techniques. That feeling of stepping onto the podium. I know you got a race coming up in a couple weeks where you obviously want to do that. The smile on the face showcases it all right there. But can you describe what it's felt like for you in your previous races, getting on that podium, knowing you've got the support of Canada as a nation behind you? I love being able to feature Canadian athletes on this show. Like, maybe share a little bit of that feeling, because I equate it to, for instance, a hockey player lifting up the Stanley Cup or someone getting drafted on draft night. Like, that's got to be an incredible feeling for you.
It's the best feeling I've ever felt in my entire life. And I think that's why I race, right? Because I'm so motivated to win to feel that feeling every time I set foot in that race car. And I think one of the most special wins was my first in F4. And, you know, it was only the second event of the year, but I had high expectations for myself, and it was almost like getting this weight off my shoulders, but also at the same time being like I can do this. Like now I'm here to fight. So every time you get to step up on the box, whether it's first, second, or third, it's a good feeling because you brought the car home shiny, and you got some good points, and you're still in it for the championship. So obviously, the goal is to end up on the top step of the box in 2 weeks in Austin, Texas, and I think that would also mean the championship. Which, I mean, that's just kind of put all together our efforts for the entire year. That's what that championship would mean to me.
Yeah, I have no doubt. We'll be following along. I'm looking forward to seeing how you
Thank you.
perform there. Have no doubt you're going to be crushing it. Give me a little bit of like the atmosphere, what that environment feels like on race day. Is it competitive? Like, are you looking over at your competitors, grilling them? Like, what's going on? Is there smack talk? How's the like? Because I feel like at times it might not be the same as like squaring up against a guy in a boxing ring or on a ice sheet or on the basketball court. Like, it's a different vibe. Like, do you want to dive into that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's kind of weird because right until we're up on the grid, um, we're all kind of tucked away in our own separate trailers with our own separate teams. But there's definitely some mind games that go on, and I'm a fan of it. I love it. But like for example, in karting, when you come off, you're all on the scale line together. So when you get off the track, you know right after you cross the finish line, you have all the drivers who still pumping full of adrenaline. They're all together. So things can break out. I've seen some pretty crazy stuff in the scale line myself. But even at the racetrack, like this year in F4, driving cars, sometimes you'll give one guy a certain look if he did something you don't like on track, or maybe rev your engine a little extra loud on the warm up lap beside him. But just like silly things like that, to try to get in their head.
100%. Hey, now I have to ask, because you've said you've seen some things on that scan line. You want to dive in? Is there one story in particular that stands out that you can bring up? Maybe add a little humor into this educational piece.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've had some altercations with drivers where it's just kind of been like, usually it doesn't get too physical because I mean, we're not really allowed to. It's not a contact sport, right? But if you
Not
push or
quite.
if you push or shove the wrong person a little too hard, it can end badly for you in terms of like a fine or a suspension or something like that. But I've definitely had my fair share of altercations off the track, like yelling at a guy if he might push you off or give you the bumper in the wrong corner. But just things like that. I've seen fights go down at the racetrack. Like it's crazy, man. It's crazy sometimes.
It's definitely like, I'm trying to think of other ones in the past that have had some heated, like, you always see those clips on TSN Sports Center, guys tossing their helmets at each other,
Yeah,
running
yeah,
back. Like,
yeah.
looks like someone's charging the mound in a baseball diamond. It's crazy, the atmosphere. Um, Obviously, your end goal is to become this incredible race car driver, sit at top of the Indy car. Like, where do you see yourself over the next couple of years consistently improving on? Like, I always like to kind of find out what maybe aspects you're looking to improve on in your performance. Are there things that you're working on right now in particular that you really want to hone in and craft before you get to that next level and really showcase what you can do?
For sure, 100%. And every time I roll it onto the track. I want to be as good as an IndyCar driver, but for the amount of experience I have and how young I am, it's not possible to be at that level yet. So, any small things that I see in my performance, I want to work on. So whether that's mentally, like maybe I want to set more goals. Maybe I want to really focus on my goal setting for the next weekend. So whether that's, doing a debrief every time I get off the track or finishing on the podium every race, like a physical goal, or it could be working on actual mechanical skills, like what I like to call them, like my race starts. So in F4, we do like standing starts. So my starts, for example, at the start of the year weren't great. So that's
Mm,
something I worked on in practice. I rolled up to the starter's box and practiced my clutch release with my brake and how much thought I was giving to really like launch the car off the line.
nice.
So there's mechanical skills and mental skills, and I'm constantly working on the aspects of my game that I feel are maybe a little bit weaker than the others, and then trying to make sure that the really sharp parts of my game stay sharp.
How much more fun is it driving a manual car compared to automatic?
That I get that question a lot, and I've never driven an automatic car on the racetrack. Like I've driven them
Oh,
on the
fair.
road,
Okay.
and I hate it because like I
Yeah.
don't have any control over it. I mean, that sounds like a control freak thing, but I don't have a control of like what gear it's in. But
Dude, no, there is not at all control freak vibes there because I like my car that I drive, my Civic is a standard and I
let's
love it. It's the
go.
best investment I ever made. Well, investment quotation. Cars aren't necessarily
No,
investments,
cars
but
are terrible investments.
that they got up 40% over COVID. So fun little fact there. But side note, we went up actually to Canadian Tire Motorsport, did that GTA Exotics, and we tested out. I drove a Ferrari 588, and that was a sick car to drive. But I was doing it in automatic, and I was like, man, I have no idea how to control this thing because it's just flaring up, and then I'm braking hard and back on the gas. Like, I don't know, it just is not the same in any aspect whatsoever. You have so much control when you're driving a standard vehicle, and it's a dying skill. Like, I don't even know what the percentage is, Jordo. Maybe you could find that out for us as far as how many vehicles are left that are standard or being made standard. Because I don't know, for you, it's got to be like that's one of the things you need as a driver.
100%. I mean, I was 14 years old getting thrown on a race car, and they're like, "Hey, you got to learn how to drive stick." And I had my fair share of like stalls, like stalling the car, pulling out of the pits, it's like
Yeah,
dumb things like that. But I learned, and now I love it. But like even thinking, like none of my friends know how to drive stick, and I'm
Jordan just
17.
told. Yeah, dude, that's well, it's like it's your generation, my generation. We're all screwed. That's why you're gonna be set when you travel anywhere because you can rent a stick car for dirt cheap.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
Jordan just mentioned just 2.4% of cars sold today have stick shifts. That's crazy. 97, 98% plus. That's
It's so
wild.
sad. I feel kind of sad.
It is. It is a little disappointing. Jordo and I both got them. We're gonna hold it out our 16s.
I like that.
Yeah, we got it. We'll hold it down for you. Don't worry. South Garda karting in Lanato, Italy, is your favorite track. Can you tell us why and maybe what like other aspects of it outside of the fact that it's an incredible view is what makes it so special?
100%. That going to that track for the first time was just like I don't know, my eyes were just like this, like so wide open because it was the first time I'd ever been to Europe for racing. And I mean
Mm,
everything about the place is beautiful. Like the scenery, it's 6 a.m. in Italy and you got there the day before and you're really tired, but you're on your way to the track and the sunsets or the sunrise, sorry, is beautiful. And then you get there and you can smell all the carts on track and the place is open, 364 days a year. It's closed on Christmas and that's it. And there's 30
wow.
go-karts on track like every day. It's crazy. But I mean, the circuit itself, like the layout of the corners, it's really flowy. It's really high speed. It's unlike tracks that we have here in North America. So to go over there, I mean, I got the opportunity twice. I just love the place, everything about it.
Yeah, I'm definitely got to get over there and check that place out. Dordo's trying to drag me to all these F1 races. He's a big F1 guy, so we'll see where we end up going to. Maybe we'll do some in-person interviews with some athletes moving forward. Get you out when you win those couple titles here moving forward. Feature the
Hopefully,
Canadians.
thank you.
Um, we got to ask who's winning the drivers' championship between Max
Ooh,
Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton.
see, that's such a heated question. Like I've been getting asked that question so much lately. I mean, Max is 6 points ahead right now, and statistically, like if you just break it down to the raw numbers, like Verstappen has been by far the more dominant driver. I'm not a massive Max Verstappen fan, but I mean, if I'm going no bias opinion, I'm going to say it's Verstappen.
There you go. You heard it here first. Matt Clark on the Athletes Podcast calling it. Dude, I feel like we could chat about this all day. I'd love for you to maybe share what you're, outside of racing, long term. Like, what do you got in mind? You're a smart kid, 17 years old. You've managed to like blow my mind for the last half an hour. What's long term plans? Like, what do you got? Obviously, you got your head screwed on properly. Like, what's the end goal? Do you have other things you're trying to accomplish as you go for track dominance?
I mean, day-to-day life is just like I have racing, I have school, and then I have like my social life that I try to attend to sometimes.
Yeah, yeah.
So, every time I can try to get out with my friends, that's good. But I really focused on that education and the racing. So, going to school, becoming an automotive engineer, that'll take me 4 years. So I'll be like 20, 22, 23 when I graduate. Hopefully by that time I'll be in IndyCar. But after that, like long-term goals, I'd like to live here. I'd like to stay in Canada. I've traveled a lot. I've been really lucky to travel as much as I have. And if I'm racing IndyCar, I still want to be right here, somewhere around Toronto, if I can afford it, that is.
Yeah,
But
that's good luck. It's tough. It's not
yeah,
easy. That's for
yeah,
sure.
yeah, yeah. But like I have a girlfriend right now, and I love her. So, hopefully in 10 years we'll be married, living in the GTA, and I'll be a professional race car driver with an engineering degree. That's the long-term goal, man.
Heck yeah, I love that. That's awesome, Mac. I really appreciate you sharing your insights, knowledge, wisdom that you've obtained. Like I said, you've got your head screwed on straight. Pretty incredible, 17-year-old. Where can people find you on social media? Because I want to also shine some light. You've popped off on Instagram here recently. Like, give everyone a little. Let's give you the Athletes Podcast bump here. Where can people find you?
Thank you. Yeah, www.mattclarkracing.com. So that's my website that we actually launched, I think, 3 or 4 months ago now. So it's relatively new, and I'm excited about that. But then I also have my Instagram, so _Matt Clark on Instagram, Matt Clark Racing on Facebook, and then I'm new to Twitter as well. It's the same as my Instagram, _Matt Clark. Trying to fire it up on all those platforms.
Beauty. Mac, we wrap up every episode asking our guests what their biggest piece of advice would be to the next generation of athletes. You're kind of our target audience in the next gen of athletes. So this is a little role reversal here, but maybe provide what you've learned, the knowledge you've obtained from all of these incredible mentors, your father as an incredible racer, your mom, like you've got this wealth of knowledge that you've obtained. What's maybe one piece of advice that sticks out to you that you'd like to share with others?
See, now I feel like an old man because like I give advice to other people, but I'd say that my main message, and funny enough, I wrote an essay on English class for this just because of my racing experience,
Nice.
would be that you have to learn from your failure, and that I think failure teaches you a lot more than winning if you have the right mindset. I think the champion's mindset is that failing or losing is your best teacher, and you kind of have to analyze it and move on and make yourself better through it. That's just kind of my little piece.
Dude, incredible. I appreciate everything that you've done. You're for the sport of Canadian racing. It's going to be a name that people should know if they don't know already. Matt Clark, pretty
Thank you.
incredible. A couple weeks down in Austin, Texas. You're going to be dominating, stepping up on that podium. Excited to follow along. Mac, really appreciate you coming on the pod, man.
Awesome. I appreciate you having me. Thank you. Thank you very much. I had a good time, and you guys are awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, folks, for tuning into the 103rd episode of the Athletes Podcast featuring Matt Clark. This kid's a stud. If you don't know the name, you should by now. He is going to be on track to crush, pun totally intended. Canadian racing family, just through and through, incredible what he's been able to do so far. Excited to see what he is able to do moving forward as well. Thank you, folks, for tuning in to the 103rd episode. It's crazy. We keep rolling week over week. Athletic Thursday. We're building a brand here. We're very fortunate to have you as a part of the journey. Jordan Maslin is our producer. He loved this episode, by the way. Ian Singleton is our videographer. He's also a huge fan. My name's David Stark, your host. Appreciate you folks for coming and listening to the Athletes Podcast. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye.